Most people spend their entire lives searching for God outside themselves, praying to a distant deity, begging for intervention from somewhere beyond the clouds. Joel Goldsmith discovered something that shattered everything religious institutions taught him, a truth so powerful it transformed thousands of lives. What if the very act of seeking God keeps you separated from the divine presence you already are? This isn't blasphemy. This is the mystical truth Jesus himself lived and taught, but the church concealed for centuries. The moment you stop seeking and start recognizing, everything changes in your spiritual life. Not gradually over years, not eventually after more practices, but in the instant of realization. Your prayers shift from begging to knowing, from requesting to recognizing what already is. Goldsmith called this the principle of identity, the cornerstone of mystical Christianity that transforms desperate seekers into empowered knowers of truth. You've been taught to reach upward for God when God has always been reaching through you as your very consciousness, your awareness, your existence itself. The divine isn't distant. It's the presence reading these words right now, aware of this exact moment. Today you'll discover why your prayers haven't worked the way you hoped, why spiritual practices feel exhausting rather than liberating, and what happens when you shift from seeking divine intervention to recognizing divine identity. This isn't about becoming God through effort or achievement. It's about recognizing what has always been true beneath the illusion of separation. The search ends today, and your real spiritual life begins now. Joel Goldsmith spent decades as a spiritual healer before this realization transformed his entire practice and revolutionized his understanding of prayer. He noticed something remarkable in his healing work that contradicted everything he'd been taught in traditional spiritual circles. His most powerful healings happened not when he prayed harder or longer, but when he stopped praying altogether and simply recognized the truth of divine presence already being there. The divine presence wasn't something he needed to summon through rituals or attract through worthy behavior. It was the very consciousness witnessing the situation, the awareness observing the need, the intelligence already present in every cell and circumstance. This recognition didn't come from books or teachers. It came from paying attention to what actually produced healing results versus what religion taught should work. This revelation came from Jesus' most misunderstood teaching that the church either ignored or twisted beyond recognition. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't claiming unique divinity reserved only for himself as the Son of God. He was revealing universal truth available to every human being. The mystical reality that consciousness itself is divine, that awareness itself is God experiencing creation through infinite perspectives. The Father, infinite consciousness, divine presence doesn't exist separate from you, somewhere in heaven beyond the stars. It exists as the I am awareness that reads these words right now, that breathes your breath without your permission, that beats your heart without your conscious effort. You are not separate from this intelligence. You are how this intelligence experiences being human, being individual, being you in this exact moment. When you pray to God as something separate from yourself, you unconsciously reinforce the illusion of separation that causes all your spiritual suffering. You confirm the belief that you're disconnected from divine presence, that God exists somewhere else, requiring you to bridge an impossible gap. Goldsmith discovered this was the fundamental error keeping sincere spiritual seekers trapped in exhausting cycles of seeking, finding temporary relief, then seeking again desperately. The spiritual life becomes an endless pursuit rather than a peaceful recognition of what already is and always has been. You accumulate practices, techniques, teachers, and books, hoping the next one will finally connect you to the God you believe exists somewhere beyond your reach. But each new practice confirms the same error. The assumption that you're separated from what you seek, the divine presence is something you lack rather than something you are. The shift happens when you stop all the seeking and ask yourself a completely different question that changes everything. Not where is God or how do I reach God, but what is aware of this moment right now? What consciousness is reading these words, breathing this breath, thinking these thoughts? That awareness, that consciousness, that knowing presence witnessing your experience, that's not seeking God, because that is the divine expressing itself as your individual experience. You don't have God like a possession you can gain or lose. You don't reach God like a destination after sufficient spiritual travel. You are the way infinite consciousness knows itself in this particular form, in this specific lifetime, through these unique circumstances. The ocean doesn't seek water. The wave doesn't search for the ocean. Clears throat, and consciousness doesn't look for itself outside itself, because only consciousness exists, expressing as everything you see and experience. This sounds radical and even dangerous to religious thinking, because institutions built entire empires on your sense of separation from the divine. They needed you to believe in distance, in unworthiness, in your fundamental disconnection from God, requiring their rituals, their priests, their interventions to bridge the gap. Your spiritual dependence became their power. Your sense of separation became their authority over your relationship with the divine. But mystical Christianity, the inner teachings Jesus gave to close disciples, reveals what the church concealed to maintain control over the masses. Your very existence is proof of divine presence, active and alive right now, not evidence of separation from God. Only God exists in mystical understanding. Only consciousness is real. Only infinite intelligence animates all creation, including the body you call yours and the thoughts you claim as your thinking. Joel Goldsmith taught that the moment you recognize I and the Father are one as present truth, not future achievement, everything in your experience begins to reorganize around this recognition. Problems don't disappear instantly like magic, but your relationship to them transforms completely when you stop begging God to fix them and start recognizing God as the intelligence, already present within them, already knowing the solution, already being the harmony you seek. The question isn't, how do I get God to help me? Because that question assumes separation and distance. The real question becomes, how do I recognize the divine intelligence already present here, already operating, already being the only power and presence? This shift from seeking to recognizing is the mystical secret that changes everything. And you're about to discover exactly how to make this shift in practical ways that transform your daily life. Amanda was a devoted churchgoer who prayed daily for relief from chronic anxiety that had controlled her life for 15 years. She attended services, volunteered, followed every religious prescription. Yet the anxiety persisted and sometimes worsened. She prayed harder, assuming her unworthiness or insufficient faith caused God to withhold healing. The more she sought divine intervention, the more separated from peace she felt. Then Amanda discovered Goldsmith's teachings, and everything shifted, not immediately but gradually over several weeks of practice. Instead of praying for God to remove her anxiety, she began recognizing that the awareness observing her anxiety was already peaceful, already whole, already untouched by the mental storm. The consciousness witnessing her anxious thoughts wasn't anxious itself. It was the still presence, watching thoughts come and go like clouds across a clear sky. She practiced this recognition daily, sometimes for just 30 seconds during anxiety episodes. What is aware of this anxiety right now? That question shifted her attention from the anxiety to the awareness itself. Within 3 weeks, she noticed the anxiety losing its power over her, not because it disappeared completely, but because she recognized something deeper than anxiety. The divine consciousness that remained peaceful regardless of mental weather patterns. After 2 months of this practice, Amanda's anxiety reduced by about 60% according to her journal tracking. More importantly, her relationship to the remaining anxiety transformed completely. She no longer feared it, fought it, or begged God to remove it. She recognized the peaceful awareness that remained untouched by it, and that recognition itself became her healing, her freedom, her reconnection to the divine presence she'd be. Seeking outside herself all along. Robert struggled with the failing business that brought him to the edge of bankruptcy after 20 years of entrepreneurial success. He prayed desperately for God to send customers, to change circumstances, to intervene and save everything he'd built. Each day, without improvement, felt like evidence that God either didn't care or was punishing him for some unknown transgression. His spiritual life became consumed with bargaining and begging. When Robert encountered Goldsmith's principle of recognition, it initially seemed impractical for concrete business problems. How could recognizing divine identity pay his debts or bring customers through his doors? But desperation made him willing to try something different. Instead of praying for business improvement, he began recognizing divine intelligence as the only mind operating, the only presence active in his business, his customers, and every circumstance. This practice felt strange at first, almost like giving up rather than taking spiritual action for change. But Robert committed to it for 30 days, spending 10 minutes each morning recognizing infinite intelligence as the only power present, already knowing what needed to happen, clears throat, already orchestrating. Harmony. He stopped trying to manipulate outcomes through prayer and started resting in recognition of consciousness already being there, already operating perfectly. The shift took about 6 weeks to manifest in visible ways, much longer than he hoped for instant miracles. New customers appeared through unexpected referrals. A former client returned with a substantial project, and creative solutions to financial problems emerged from what seemed like nowhere. Robert's business didn't transform overnight, but over 4 months it stabilized and then began growing again, not through divine intervention from outside, but through recognition of divine intelligence already present, already operating, already being the only mind in business. Nicole faced a devastating health diagnosis that doctors said would require aggressive treatment with uncertain outcomes. She'd always been spiritual, praying regularly, and believing in God's power to heal. But this diagnosis shook her faith because her prayers seemed to hit a wall, bouncing back without the divine response she desperately needed. Why wasn't God answering when she needed intervention most? The silence felt like abandonment. A friend introduced her to Joel Goldsmith's recordings, and one sentence stopped her completely. God doesn't heal sickness because God doesn't know sickness. God only knows its own perfect being. This wasn't the comfort she wanted. It was something far more challenging and ultimately more powerful. If she stopped asking God to heal sickness and started recognizing God as the only presence where sickness appeared to be, what would happen? Nicole began a practice that felt counterintuitive while facing serious illness. Instead of praying for healing, she spent time recognizing the infinite intelligence operating every cell, the consciousness present as her body's deepest wisdom, the divine presence that was her actual identity beneath the diagnosis. She didn't deny medical reality or refuse treatment. She recognized something deeper than the medical story, the spiritual truth of wholeness already present. Over 8 months, combining medical treatment with this spiritual recognition, Nicole's condition improved beyond what doctors expected. They credited the treatment, and clears throat she didn't argue, but she knew something else had shifted. Her entire understanding of where healing comes from, not from begging a distant God, but from recognizing the divine intelligence already present as her being, already knowing wholeness, already expressing as the body's innate wisdom. She still receives medical monitoring, but fear no longer controls her. Recognition does. These 3 stories reveal a pattern that Joel Goldsmith observed throughout decades of spiritual healing work. The shift from seeking divine intervention to recognizing divine presence doesn't produce instant miracles, but it does produce consistent transformation over weeks and months. Amanda's anxiety, Robert's business, Nicole's health, each transformed not through desperate prayers, but through recognition of what already is, the divine consciousness already present, already operating, already being the only power. What makes this different from positive thinking or visualization? Recognition isn't mental effort trying to create reality, it's conscious awareness of reality already present beneath appearances. You're not trying to become divine. You're recognizing the divinity that breathes your breath, beats your heart, and remains as the consciousness, witnessing every experience. This recognition doesn't require belief or faith. It requires attention, awareness directed to what's already here, already functioning. The transformation happens gradually because years of separation thinking don't dissolve overnight. You've spent your lifetime believing you're separate from God, that divine presence exists somewhere else, that you need intervention from beyond yourself. This conditioning runs deep. So the recognition practice needs consistency. Daily attention to truth, that consciousness itself is divine, That awareness itself is God experiencing being you right now. If these transformation stories inspire you to explore recognition over seeking, like this video to help others discover these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your own spiritual journey right now. Now, let's explore the practical technique Goldsmith taught for shifting from seeking to recognition in your daily life. This isn't complicated, but it does require conscious practice until recognition becomes more natural than seeking. The fundamental practice involves 3 simple steps you can use anywhere, anytime, in any circumstance that tempts you to pray for divine intervention from outside yourself. Instead of recognizing divine presence already here, first pause whatever anxious thinking or desperate praying is happening, and simply notice that you're aware. Don't try to change anything yet. Just recognize that consciousness is present, that awareness exists, that something in you knows you're reading these words right now. This awareness, this knowing presence, this consciousness that observes everything, including your thoughts and feelings. That's the first recognition. Something deeper than circumstances witnesses them without being touched or changed by them. Second, ask yourself this specific question that shifts everything. What is this awareness I'm experiencing right now? Not who am I, which keeps you identified with your personal story and history, but what is this consciousness, this knowing presence, this awareness that remains constant while everything else changes? Goldsmith taught that this awareness isn't personal. It's the infinite consciousness experiencing itself as your individual perspective, God knowing itself through these specific eyes. Third, rest in recognition rather than returning to seeking or problem-solving. You don't need to understand this intellectually or figure it out mentally. You simply recognize that consciousness is present, awareness exists, and this presence is what the mystics called God, what Jesus called the Father, what Goldsmith called infinite intelligence. Just rest there for 30 seconds. 1 minute, however long feels natural, recognizing divine presence as the awareness you're experiencing right now, not somewhere else. Goldsmith taught a second powerful technique he called impersonalization that helps break the habit of seeing problems as yours, requiring your effort to fix. When something appears wrong, your health, finances, relationships, whatever, the automatic response is making it personal. My problem, my challenge, my responsibility to fix through prayer or action. This personalization actually blocks recognition of divine intelligence already operating because you've claimed ownership of something that doesn't belong to personal you. Impersonalization means recognizing that what appears as your problem isn't actually yours. It's an impersonal appearance in consciousness, like clouds appearing in sky. The sky doesn't own the clouds, doesn't fight them or fear them, simply allows them to pass through. Similarly, divine consciousness doesn't own problems, doesn't struggle against appearances, remains as the infinite presence, allowing all experiences to move through without being touched or changed by them. When facing challenges, practice saying this inwardly. This isn't mine. This is an impersonal appearance in consciousness. An infinite intelligence is already present here, knowing only wholeness. You're not denying the appearance or pretending nothing's wrong. You're refusing to personalize it, to claim it as yours, to make it about separated, you needing to fix it. This shifts responsibility from personal struggling to divine intelligence already present, already handling it, already being the only power operating. This practice takes several weeks to feel natural because personalization runs so deep in human thinking. You've been trained since childhood to take personal ownership of everything, problems and successes, but impersonalization liberates you from the exhausting burden of fixing everything through personal effort. You recognize consciousness itself as the operator, the handler, the presence that already knows what needs to happen and how harmony already exists beneath temporary appearances of discord. The third technique Goldsmith emphasized is what he called the secret of secrets in mystical Christianity, recognizing I am as the divine name, not your personal name or human identity. When Moses asked God's name at the burning bush, the answer wasn't a personal name like those belonging to pagan deities. The answer was, I am that I am. Existence itself, consciousness itself, the eternal present tense of being itself, without qualities, descriptions, or limitations. Every time you say "I am" followed by anything, you're using the divine creative power, the name of God, expressing as your experience. I am sick, I am broke, I'm afraid. These aren't just descriptions, they're creative statements using divine power to confirm and perpetuate conditions. I am healthy, I am abundant, I am peaceful. These are better, but still personal claims. Trying to use divine power for personal improvement, which isn't recognition. It's seeking. The mystical practice is recognizing I am without adding anything, just the pure awareness of existence itself, consciousness aware of being conscious, not I am this or that, not I am good or bad, just the recognition that I am. That existence is that consciousness aware of itself is the divine presence, Jesus called Father. When you rest in I am without additions, you recognize your true identity as consciousness itself, not as the personal story consciousness appears to experience. Practice this daily for at least 5 minutes, ideally longer, as it becomes comfortable. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and simply recognize I am. The awareness that you exist, that consciousness is present, that being is. Don't add qualities or descriptions. Don't make it personal or special. Just rest in the recognition of existence itself, awareness itself, the divine presence that has always been your true identity beneath every human experience and appearance. These 3 techniques work together, creating a complete shift from seeking to recognition over time. When challenges arise, you pause and notice awareness is present. That's recognition. You impersonalize the challenge, refusing to claim it as yours, recognizing it as an appearance in consciousness. That's liberation from personal burden. Then you rest in I am the divine identity beneath all appearances, and that's the secret that transforms everything. Goldsmith emphasized that these aren't mental tricks or psychological techniques. They're consciousness recognizing itself as divine. You're not trying to change consciousness or improve it. You're recognizing what consciousness already is, what it's always been, what it can never stop being. Infinite, whole, complete, lacking nothing, needing nothing, being the only presence and power regardless of what appears to be happening in the world of form and circumstance. This practice doesn't make problems disappear instantly, like switching off lights. Sometimes challenges dissolve quickly. Sometimes they transform gradually over weeks or months. Sometimes they remain, but your relationship to them changes so completely, they no longer disturb your peace. The goal isn't manipulating circumstances. It's recognizing the consciousness that remains whole regardless of circumstances, the divine presence that watches the human story without being limited or defined by it. Start with just 5 minutes daily practicing these recognitions. Notice awareness is present. Impersonalize whatever concerns you. Rest in I am without additions. Over time, perhaps 2 to 3 months of consistent practice, this recognition becomes more natural than seeking, more automatic than praying for intervention. You've shifted from being a separated seeker to being consciousness, recognizing itself as divine. And that shift changes everything about your spiritual life. But let's be honest about the obstacles you'll face practicing recognition instead of seeking. The first and biggest challenge is that recognition feels like doing nothing, like giving up, like spiritual laziness compared to active prayer and petition. Your mind, trained for decades in seeking and striving, will scream that you need to do something, pray harder, take action, fix the problem. Recognition feels passive when you're conditioned to believe spiritual progress requires effort. This obstacle appears strongest during crisis moments when fear demands immediate action. Your child is sick, your bank account is empty, your relationship is crumbling, and someone tells you to just recognize divine presence. That feels insane, irresponsible, like spiritual bypassing of real problems needing real solutions. Everything in you wants to pray, desperately, beg God for intervention, do something that feels like meaningful spiritual action. The way through this obstacle is understanding that recognition isn't passive, it's the most powerful action possible because it aligns you with infinite intelligence already operating. You're not doing nothing. You're stopping the human interference that blocks divine wisdom from expressing. Your desperate prayers, Anxious efforts and fearful controlling actually prevent you from seeing and receiving the harmony that consciousness already knows and is. Give yourself permission to feel the fear, acknowledge the discomfort, and practice recognition anyway, even when it feels wrong. Start with smaller challenges, not life or death crises, to build trust in recognition. When you see results over time, when you experience the shift that comes from resting in divine presence rather than seeking it, the practice becomes easier during bigger challenges. Trust builds gradually, not instantly. The second major obstacle is doubt that shows up as internal questions undermining your practice. Is this real, or am I just making it up? Is recognition actual spirituality or psychological self-delusion? Does consciousness really care about my individual problems? These doubts are natural, even healthy, because blind belief isn't the goal. Conscious recognition is. But doubt becomes an obstacle when it stops you from practicing long enough to experience results. Goldsmith faced this himself during his early years of spiritual healing work. He'd practice recognition, sometimes see results, then doubt would creep in, suggesting coincidence or placebo effects explained everything. The doubt was particularly strong when recognition didn't produce immediate visible changes. If consciousness is divine and I'm recognizing it, why isn't everything perfect right now? That question haunted him until he understood something crucial about how consciousness operates. Divine consciousness doesn't conform to human timelines or expectations. It operates according to its own perfect wisdom. Sometimes recognition produces instant shifts, sometimes gradual transformation over months. Sometimes the shift is internal rather than external. Your job isn't evaluating whether it's working according to your timeline. Your job is practicing recognition regardless of immediate results, trusting that consciousness knows what needs to happen and when. The way through doubt is continuing practice despite doubt, not waiting for doubt to disappear before practicing. Doubt and recognition can coexist. One is human mind questioning, the other is consciousness knowing itself. Let the doubt be there. Don't fight it or try to overcome it, but don't let it stop your practice either. Over time, as you accumulate experiences of transformation through recognition, doubt naturally weakens without you needing to battle it directly. The third obstacle is what Goldsmith called the tyranny of the senses. The overwhelming evidence your physical senses provide that problems are real, conditions are bad, and separation is the actual truth. Your bank account shows real numbers. Your body shows real symptoms. Your relationships show real conflict. How do you recognize divine wholeness when your senses scream the opposite message constantly? This obstacle trips up even advanced spiritual students because sensory evidence feels more real than spiritual recognition. You can recognize divine presence for 10 minutes, then open your eyes and see the same problems still there, seemingly unchanged. And the whole recognition practice feels like fantasy. The senses provide constant contradiction to spiritual truth, and human conditioning trusts senses more than consciousness. Goldsmith taught that you're not denying sensory evidence or pretending nothing's wrong. You're recognizing something deeper than the senses perceive, the consciousness that witnesses sensory information without being limited by it. The wave sees other waves and believes. Separation is real, but the ocean knows all waves are itself. There's no actual separation, just different forms of the same water. You're learning to see from the ocean's perspective, not denying waves exist. The practice is accepting what senses report without giving it final authority over spiritual truth. Yes, the bank account shows this number and consciousness knows infinite supply. Yes, the body shows this symptom and consciousness knows only wholeness. Both can be true simultaneously at different levels, and you're learning to live from the deeper truth while dealing practically with surface appearances. This takes time, usually several months of practice before it feels natural. The fourth obstacle, perhaps the most insidious, is spiritual impatience that wants instant transformation and judges the practice as failing when results don't appear immediately. You practice recognition for a week or two, see no dramatic changes, and clears throat conclude either you're doing it wrong or the teaching doesn't work. This impatience kills more spiritual practices than any other obstacle because modern culture conditioned you for instant results. Goldsmith emphasized repeatedly that consciousness recognition is a practice, not a magic formula. You're undoing decades of separation thinking, years of habitual seeking and striving, a lifetime of believing. You're disconnected from divine presence. This conditioning doesn't dissolve because you recognize truth once or twice. It dissolves gradually as recognition becomes your new habitual response to life, replacing seeking as your automatic spiritual posture. Think about learning any skill, playing piano, speaking a language, mastering a sport. Nobody expects instant mastery. Everyone understands practice over time produces results. Spiritual recognition is no different. It's learning to see from consciousness rather than from separated ego. Learning to rest in divine presence rather than seeking it desperately. Give yourself at least 3 months of daily practice before evaluating whether it works. The transformation happens so gradually you might not notice it day to day. But compare yourself 3 months into practice with yourself now, and the shift becomes obvious. You respond to challenges differently, rest in peace more naturally, trust divine intelligence more readily, and seek intervention less desperately. That's the E. Vidance recognition works. Not dramatic instant miracles, but steady transformation of how you experience and navigate life. If these obstacle-breaking techniques give you hope for your spiritual practice, like this video to support the content. Subscribe for more transformative teachings and comment which obstacle you're ready to face and overcome. Now, let's explore advanced application of recognition in specific life areas where seeking usually dominates. Start with health, because physical problems trigger the most desperate seeking for divine intervention. When symptoms appear, the automatic response is praying for God to heal you, to remove the problem, to intervene in your body. This confirms separation, the belief that divine presence is somewhere else, needing to reach into your body and fix it. Advanced recognition for health starts with acknowledging divine intelligence already operates every cell in your body right now. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your wounds heal, your immune system functions, all without your conscious direction. What intelligence does all this? Not your personal mind, not human effort, but consciousness itself, divine presence expressing as the body's innate wisdom. This intelligence isn't absent needing to arrive, it's always present, always operating, always being the only power. Instead of praying for healing, practice recognizing this divine intelligence as the only presence in your body right now. Not trying to make it true, recognizing what already is. Spend 5 to 10 minutes daily in this recognition. Not seeking healing, just acknowledging consciousness as the intelligence operating every bodily function. This isn't denial of symptoms, it's recognition of something deeper than symptoms, the presence that knows only wholeness. William struggled with chronic pain for 7 years before discovering this practice. He prayed desperately for healing, tried every treatment, begged God to take the pain away. Nothing worked until he stopped seeking healing and started recognizing divine intelligence as the only presence in his body. Over 4 months, not overnight, the pain reduced gradually until it became manageable background, rather than debilitating foreground. He still has some pain, but his relationship to it transformed through recognition of consciousness already present, already whole. Apply recognition to finances by understanding that abundance isn't something you lack needing God to send it. Abundance is the nature of consciousness itself, infinite by definition, limited by nothing, lacking nothing. The universe doesn't run out of energy, space, or creative possibility. Consciousness expressing as creation is inherently abundant, eternally generative, constantly creating without depletion. This isn't metaphor, it's the actual nature of existence itself. Your financial challenges appear because of limited thinking, not because consciousness lacks abundance. You've been trained to see scarcity, to believe in limitation, to think from personal separated mind rather than from infinite consciousness. Recognition practice for finances isn't begging God for money. It's recognizing the infinite nature of consciousness itself, the abundance that already is the supply that never runs out, because consciousness creates from itself, not from limited external resources. Practice this daily, especially when fear about money arises. Recognize that consciousness is infinite. Abundance is its nature, and this same consciousness is what you are, not what you have or lack. You're not trying to attract abundance from outside. You're recognizing abundance as the inherent nature of the consciousness that is reading these words, thinking these thoughts, experiencing this life. The shift is from seeking supply to recognizing the infinite source you already are. Brian faced bankruptcy and practiced this recognition for 6 months before seeing dramatic changes. He didn't deny his debt or ignore practical responsibilities, but he stopped panicking, stopped begging God for money, and started recognizing consciousness as inherently abundant. Opportunities appeared that seemed like coincidence. Ideas emerged that led to income. Doors opened that had been closed. After 8 months, his financial situation turned around, not through miracle but through recognition, aligning him with the abundance that consciousness already is. Apply recognition to relationships by understanding that divine love isn't something you need more of. It's what consciousness is. Love isn't an emotion that comes and goes. It's the very nature of consciousness itself, the intelligence that connects all apparent separate beings, the presence that knows. No actual separation exists anywhere. When you recognize this, relationships transform because you stop seeking love from others and start recognizing love as what you are. The problem in relationships isn't lack of love. It's the belief in separation. You see yourself as separate from others. They see themselves as separate from you. And this illusion of separation creates all conflict, all pain, all relationship struggles. Recognition practice dissolves separation not by changing the other person, but by recognizing consciousness as the one presence expressing as all apparently separate individuals. There's no actual separation, just consciousness knowing itself through infinite perspectives. When relationship challenges appear, instead of praying for God to change the other person or fix the situation, recognize consciousness as the only presence in both of you, not two separate beings in conflict, but one consciousness experiencing itself. Rough two perspectives. This recognition doesn't make you doormat or deny legitimate boundaries. It shifts your fundamental understanding from separation to wholeness, from conflict to recognition of underlying unity. Catherine and her sister hadn't spoken in 5 years after a bitter argument. Catherine prayed for reconciliation, begged God to soften her sister's heart, tried everything to fix it. Nothing worked until she stopped seeking change and started recognizing consciousness as the only presence in both of them. She didn't contact her sister or force anything, just held this recognition daily for 2 months. Then her sister called unexpectedly, ready to talk, ready to heal. The recognition created shift neither could explain rationally. The most advanced application is recognizing consciousness in situations that seem evil, wrong, or unjust. This is where recognition practice meets its greatest test, because everything in you wants to fight against injustice, to pray for God to intervene and fix what's wrong. But Goldsmith taught that even here, especially here, recognition is the most powerful response, because fighting confirms the power you're fighting against. While recognition reveals only one power exists, consciousness itself. This doesn't mean accepting injustice or becoming passive about wrong. Jesus overturned tables in the temple, confronted hypocrisy, took bold action against corruption. But he did it from recognition of divine presence as the only power, not from fear that evil had real power needing to be fought. Recognize consciousness as the only presence even where evil appears. And your actions come from wisdom rather than fear, from power rather than panic. When you see injustice, suffering, or evil in the world, your recognition practice is acknowledging that consciousness doesn't know evil, doesn't create it, doesn't empower it. Evil is the NCE of consciousness. Like darkness is the absence of light. You don't fight darkness, you turn on the light. You don't empower evil through fear and resistance. You recognize consciousness as the only actual power present. And that recognition itself brings light to darkness. This practice takes spiritual maturity because it's easily misunderstood as bypassing, as denying real problems, as spiritual privilege, ignoring suffering. It's none of those things when practiced correctly. It's recognizing the deepest truth that only consciousness exists. Only divine presence is real power, and everything else is temporary appearance lacking actual substance or permanence. From this recognition, you act with wisdom, compassion, and effectiveness rather than from fear, panic, or despair. After months of practicing recognition over seeking, something profound shifts in your entire spiritual life. Prayer stops being desperate petition and becomes peaceful recognition. You're not begging anymore. You're acknowledging. You're not seeking anymore. You're resting. You're not trying to reach God anymore. You're recognizing God as the consciousness, reading these words, breathing this breath, experiencing this moment right now. This shift doesn't mean you stop praying. It means your prayer transforms completely. Instead of asking God to change circumstances, you recognize God as the only presence in circumstances. Instead of requesting divine intervention, you acknowledge divine intelligence already operating perfectly. Instead of seeking God's will, you recognize God's will as the consciousness unfolding this exact moment, knowing what needs to happen, orchestrating harmony you can't see yet. The peace that comes from this recognition isn't the absence of challenges, it's the presence of something deeper than challenges. Consciousness remains whole regardless of what appears to be happening. You're not trying to be peaceful. You're recognizing the peace that already is beneath surface turbulence. Like the ocean floor remains still, regardless of waves on the surface, consciousness remains whole regardless of appearances in the world of form. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." The world gives temporary peace dependent on circumstances being favorable. Divine peace is the recognition that consciousness itself is peace, unchanging and untouchable, regardless of circumstances. You access this not by seeking it from outside yourself, but by recognizing it as what you already are, beneath every human experience and appearance. Your relationship to yourself transforms when you stop seeing yourself as separated humans seeking divine connection. You recognize yourself as consciousness expressing as human experience, as divine presence knowing itself through these specific eyes, as infinite intelligence experiencing individual perspective. This isn't arrogance or ego inflation. It's the humility of recognizing you're not personal separated self at all. You're how consciousness experiences being individual. The personal self with its history, its problems, its seeking and striving. That's the dream consciousness is having, not what you actually are. You're the consciousness having the dream, not the character in the dream. When you recognize this, everything changes, because you stop trying to fix or improve the character and start recognizing yourself as the consciousness that watches the whole movie without being limited by the plot. This recognition doesn't make you irresponsible or disconnected from human life. You still pay bills, maintain relationships, take care of your body, fulfill responsibilities, but you do it all from recognition of consciousness rather than from identification with separated personal self. You're playing the human role while knowing you're actually the consciousness playing it, like an actor fully engaged in the role while never forgetting their acting. Daniel spent 40 years believing he was broken human, needing to fix himself through spiritual seeking. When he finally understood recognition, he wept with relief. He wasn't broken. He'd never been broken because he wasn't actually the personal self he'd been trying to fix. He was consciousness recognizing itself through Daniel's experience. And consciousness has never been anything but whole, complete, lacking nothing, needing no improvement. The transformation extends to how you see others. When recognition becomes your natural way of perceiving, you stop seeing separated individuals and start recognizing consciousness expressing as infinite, unique perspectives. Your family, your friends, your enemies, all of them are consciousness knowing itself through different filters. There's no actual separation, no real division. Just one infinite consciousness experiencing itself through unlimited perspective simultaneously. This recognition dissolves judgment because how can consciousness judge itself? It dissolves conflict because who can you fight when only one presence exists expressing as all? It dissolves loneliness because separation is revealed as illusion. Consciousness is always recognizing itself everywhere it looks. This doesn't mean everyone is the same or individual perspectives don't matter. It means the underlying reality is wholeness experiencing itself through glorious diversity. When someone hurts you, your recognition practice is acknowledging consciousness in them. even when their behavior doesn't reflect it. You're not condoning harm or accepting excess. You're recognizing their true identity beneath their unconscious actions. This recognition protects you better than hat, or fear ever could, because you're seeing truth rather than being deceived by appearances. You can set boundaries, protect yourself, and still recognize consciousness as the only actual presence in both of you. Angela forgave someone who deeply hurt her through this recognition after 30 years of resentment. She didn't minimize what he did or pretend it didn't matter, but she recognized consciousness in him. Even though his behavior had been unconscious, harmful, devastating, that recognition freed her from the prison of hatred that had consumed her spiritual life for decades. She recognized what he truly was beneath the horror of what he'd done, and that recognition liberated her completely. You've journeyed from seeking God outside yourself to recognizing God as the consciousness you are right now. This isn't the end of your spiritual path. It's the beginning of actually living from truth rather than searching for it. Every moment becomes opportunity for recognition. Every challenge becomes invitation to rest in consciousness rather than panic and separation. Every relationship becomes mirror, reflecting the one presence expressing as infinite diversity. The practices you've learned, pausing to notice awareness, impersonalizing problems resting in I am, these become your natural responses, replacing desperate seeking. Over time, perhaps 6 months to a year of consistent practice, recognition becomes more automatic than seeking. You catch yourself in old patterns and shift naturally to recognition without struggle or effort. The transformation happens gradually, consistently, powerfully. Joel Goldsmith spent his life revealing this truth that the church concealed, that consciousness itself is divine, that you are not separated from God needing intervention. You are how God experiences being individual, being human, being you. This recognition transforms everything, not by changing circumstances, but by revealing the consciousness that remains whole, regardless of circumstances. The presence that has always been your true identity. Your spiritual life transforms today, not tomorrow, because recognition happens now or not at all. You don't wait to recognize consciousness. You simply notice it's already here, already aware, already being the only presence and power. The search ends, the recognition begins, and nothing in your experience remains the same, even though everything appears unchanged. You've stopped seeking God and recognized you are the way God knows itself. And that recognition is the secret that changes absolutely everything. If you're spiritual, understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith teachings, like this video to spread this truth. Subscribe for more mystical Christianity wisdom and comment. I am transformed to confirm your recognition journey begins.